Hello, this is Professor Reidinger Dotterman. We are beginning week 3 in Summer 1 Intensive. It is a very, very busy week. At the end of this week, believe it or not, you should have a completed draft of your research paper ready for review. So this week is moving along very quickly. This tutorial is about revisions and annotated bibliographies, both of which you're certainly working on the annotated bibliography this week, and you may wish to start revisions. Revisions. Essay 1 or essay number 2 can be revised for a higher grade one time. Revisions are due on the last day of class, which for us is June 24th. Um, you can only revise one of the two essays, unfortunately, just because of time constraints. If you feel like you have dramatically misunderstood an assignment, and you feel like you do need to revise both of them, talk to me individually, but for the most part, I would advise you just to think about revising one of the first papers, and here's why. Essay number 1 and essay number 2 are not worth that much of your final grade. They're each worth 15% of your final grade, and as long as you don't have a 0 on them, they're not going to sink you in a really horrible way. Um, I mean, they'll affect your grade, of course, but not like they would if you had a 0. Whereas the research paper is worth 40% of your final grade. So in thinking about how much time you have left in the course and how much you need to do, the bulk of your effort should be on having a really strong research paper. That's much more important than worrying about a few points here or there on essay 1 or essay 2. Um, if you have really misunderstood the assignment and you have a low score on one of the papers, I would certainly advise you to revise that, but I wouldn't make revision a major focus for you on essay 1 or essay 2. The research paper is much more important, just mathematically, for your final grade. Revisions can only be done for essays that were submitted on time and for which you completed the peer review process. And this is because revising is not a substitute for having participated in the writing process. It's a complement to having participated in the writing process. So if you did what you were supposed to do all along and you still wound up with a grade that you weren't satisfied with, the reward for having completed the process is that you get to do the revision. If you didn't complete the process, the revision is not a substitute for having done that. Revisions are not a guarantee of a higher grade, but you will not receive a lower grade. So sometimes students revise a paper and they either don't make revisions that really make it better. Sometimes, very, very rarely, a student will revise a paper and it actually winds up not being as successful because while they maybe improve one thing, they do so at the expense of something else. For example, a student might expand his or her explanation of a particular point in the paper, but do so in a way that the paper now no longer really reflects the thesis statement. And then, so now the paper maybe has a really good middle section, but the organization is off, and sometimes that can make the paper not as strong. That doesn't happen very often, but should it happen to you, you will not receive a lower grade. Revisions should be submitted using the essay number 1 or number 2 as its appropriate Safe Assign tab. This is because I have to enter revision grades manually. Essay number 1 and essay number 2 are linked into the grade book's weighting system. I set up a weighted category and they're each weighted for 15% of the final grade. The revision tabs can also, of course, be linked into that because then we have too many grades going into the weighting and it doesn't give me a chance to do either or, select the higher. So I have to enter it manually. So submit the revision, I'll grade the revision, I'll put in the grade and the scoring rubric for the assignment in the revision or revised essay 1 or essay 2 section. And then if the grade is higher, I will go back and manually change just the grade under the original assignment for essay 1 or essay 2, but the scoring rubric and the assignment that you submitted originally will stay there. So if you get a different grade on the revision and you want to see why you got a different grade, to access the scoring guide, you'll still go under the revised tab. But rest assured, I will change it so that you have the appropriate grade calculated into your final grade for the class. Okay, in terms of revising effectively, I'm always thinking about, if you're a student and you have a limited amount of time, how can you make the changes that are going to matter the most? And that's actually one of the reasons why I do scoring rubrics. Look very carefully at the scoring rubric to see where you lost points. So don't worry about categories where you have nines and eights. Nines and eights are really good scores, and the changes that you're making there are going to be pretty minimal in terms of the impact that they'll have on your grade. You know, if you look at the range, nines or 90s, those are exceptional. A's, I don't give out very many A's. So if you have nines, certainly you're doing really well in a category. If you have eights, those are B's, and so still you're doing well in a category. You want to look at the sevens and certainly the fives and sixes to see where you lost the points, and focus your revision efforts on addressing those issues. Also, read the comments on the paper itself. Within your draft, sometimes I've made comments on sentence level errors. I do not mark all sentence level errors, so it's important that you, in addition to looking at the patterns of error I identify and the errors I identify, that you also really carefully edit and proofread your paper to find those sentence level errors. Sometimes in my comments on your paper, I'll tell you that a paragraph isn't clear or a point needs just a little further explication. I will also at times tell you that the citation needs work or the paraphrasing needs work. Those are important things to pay attention to. The end comments are a little bit different. When I write the end comments, I always worry that they sound negative, but my intention with end comments is not to be negative. My intention with end comments is to kind of give you a strategy. So when I write end comments, I usually address the things that I think are most important in terms of, if you were going to revise this, what would you need to change? So often if you look at your end comments, you can find the strategy very specifically that I would suggest for your revision, the things that most need to be changed in order to improve the paper. You can use your peers as a resource. You have been working really carefully with your peers to complete the wiki assignments this summer. I'm really happy to say that most groups are working really, really well together. There's been some great collaboration. You've done a really good job. And just because there's no assigned peer review for the revisions doesn't mean you can't informally organize one. So feel free to use your peers as a resource. Um, you can also ask me for help, and I encourage you to do so. I expected my phone to be ringing a lot more than it has been this summer. I've had a couple of students who've called me a lot, but not many of you. You should feel free to call me. That's what I'm here for. You're not interrupting me. If I can't pick up, I won't, but most of the time I can, and I can certainly call you back as soon as possible. And I'm happy to do that. This is what I'm doing right now. You know, I'm teaching this class, so it's not disrupting me or bothering me to call me or to ask me for help. I'm happy to help you. You just need to ask me. Um, this is a little bit different from a face-to-face course where I have regular office hours, because everybody's working at seems to be working, if I'm judging from when things are being uploaded, seems to be working at really different times. Some of you are working in the middle of the night, which you can't call me in the middle of the night, but some people are working during the day, and so I'm not really sure um, when to schedule, say, an online meeting. So it's on demand. So if you have a question, you want to talk to me, you can call me. The other thing that we can also do is set up a video conference with each other using Collaborate in Blackboard. It's a little bit of a bulky utility, but we can certainly make it work if you feel like you need to see a face. That's absolutely a possibility. So please let me know if you need help. I'm happy to help you. That's what I'm here for. I want you to do well in the class. You're not bothering me. Please remember that I am here to support you in the class. All right, let's talk about the annotated bibliographies now. The annotated bibliographies must include 5 sources, and you should only include 5 sources. That's all that figures into the grading, so don't include more than 5 sources. The sources cannot include course readings. The annotated bibliography is evidence of research in progress, and the course readings are not evidence of your research. They're evidence of my research. So while you can include a course reading in, say, the total number of sources that you wind up using in the research paper, you cannot include one in the annotated bibliography assignment. They all need to be sources you have located through your own research. You must include the complete citation information formatted in APA style as it would appear on a references page. You must also include a summary of the relevant source content. Do not paste from the abstract. Pasting from the abstract that appears in the database is plagiarism. It also doesn't do what I'm really asking you to do, which is to show that you have located the source and read it and thought about it. And if you paste from the abstract, you're also probably not really hitting on what's relevant. I mean, if you think about it, let's say you have a citation for a research article. A research article is 25 to 40 pages. Are you using everything from that 25 to 40 pages in your 8-page research paper? Probably not. So you need to think about um, what is really going to be used in your paper. What is the part of the research article that's relevant? And that's what you need to provide the summary of. You should also include an explication of how the source will be used in the paper. And this is fairly brief. If you look at the sample annotated bibliography that is included in this module folder, two things I want to point out. First of all, even though the sample only has 3 sources, doesn't mean you only need 3 sources. It does clearly say at the bottom you have to have 5 in the annotated bibliography, and you do have to have 5. It has 3 because I was preparing it originally as a handout, and I didn't want to have more than 2 pages because then I would have to copy an additional page. So that is why there are 3 sources. You do need 5. But the other thing that you notice that you should emulate from the sample is that the annotations are not super long. They're 1 to 2 short paragraphs, and that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for a very specific short summary, and I'm looking for a very specific short statement of how something will be used in your paper. Now, specific is not, I am going to use this in my paper as support. That's not appropriate. That's too general. But you could say something like, I am going to use this in my paper to, say, explain how explain the best practices for an inclusive classroom setting, right? That's not lengthy, but it's specific. I know how it's going to be used in your paper. So that's what you need to include. In terms of how the assignment is graded, I think that'll be helpful for you to know. Um, each source is worth 20 points. Only 5 sources count toward the grade. Don't do more than you need to do. Um, just include 5 sources and do a good job with the 5 sources. 5 points are given for the complete citation information of an appropriate source. So, do you have a source that is appropriate to be included in the research paper? Do you have all of the information there about how I would find that source? If do I have enough information there that I could go find your source? And that's worth 5 points. 5 points are given for having that information in correct APA citation format. So I look for, is it complete, but I also look for, is it correctly formatted in APA format. Another 5 points are given for a summary of the source, and 5 points are given for an explication of how the source is used in the paper. So in terms of the way the annotated bibliography works grade-wise, I find that I give out lots of A's and or high B pluses, and I give out lots of D's and F's. So papers that are A's or high B pluses basically do everything I ask them to do. They include the appropriate source. They have 5 sources. They include the appropriate citation information. They have it either correctly in APA format or with minor errors. They include a summary of the source, and they include an explication of how the source will be used in the paper. They do all those things. They can't help but get an A or a high B plus on the annotated bibliography. When students don't do those things, or when they get a D or F on the assignment, here's why. Either they haven't included 5 sources. So, for example, if you only have 3 sources, you're already starting off at a 60 for the assignment. Um, that's one way they fail. Or they fail to do one of the 4 things I asked them to do. Either they don't have the complete citation information, or they've located sources that really aren't appropriate, or they have failed to put it in APA format. Sometimes I have students who try to turn this in MLA format or Chicago format or no format at all. You'll lose points very fast that way. 5 points are given for a summary of a source. So if you don't summarize the source, you don't include the annotation, you lose points there. You also can lose points if you don't explain how the source is used in the paper. So if you do all of the things I ask you to do, you should do pretty well on the assignment. And it's important because it's worth 10% of your grade. And this is not something that you can revise again for a higher grade. It's something you need to make sure you get right the first time. So again, if you have questions about this, please feel free to ask me. You do not have to do this without support. But I cannot help you if I do not know that you need help. So please call me. Please send me emails. If you need to see a face, let me know. We will chat over, collaborate. Okay. Good luck this week. I know it's a busy week, but rest assured it will come to an end, and you will have a completed research paper by the end of it. So think of it this way: if you write, a couple of pages a day, you will have pretty close to the completed rough draft by the end of this week.